Welcome to another segment of Handy Andy on BPTV. And today we're going to do something a little different. Most people are aware that I love hardware, I love tools, I love projects, I love plumbing, I love electrical work. Those are all things that go along with, say, the Handy Andy tag, the title, and so forth. But a lot of people may not be aware that I love to cook. As you can see, today's segment, we have a few items in front of us, and along with any regular foods you're thinking, I love to make pies. Pies are probably my favorite, and today, with July 4th just around the corner and so forth, we're going to be making an apple pie. What's more all-American than an apple pie for July 4th? So for this month's segment of Handy Andy, we're going to be showing you how I make my apple pies. And I have been making these pies for all my adult life. So I'm going to say I got 40 years into making pie, and after I got married, it was a lot of fun for my wife because I was testing all these recipes and coming up with my own recipe, a little bit of this, a little bit of this. And, 30 some years later of marriage, she's telling me that it's still not perfect and I still got to practice for her. So I like making pies and I like making them good. So, starting with the most important ingredient in your apple pie is your apple. Tried a lot of different apples over the years. McIntosh apple is the only apple that I will use anymore making my apple pies. It has a little bit of a tart taste to it, but it's a great cooking apple. It's not like a Red Delicious apple where they're good for eating but not good for cooking. This is a cooking apple. So we'll peel them, we'll cut them, we'll slice them, we'll get them into the pie, and along with the rest of the ingredients from flour, shortening, sugar, salt, lemon juice, cinnamon, nutmeg, ice cold water. Has to be ice cold water. I'll explain that when we're doing the dough on it. And also some butter and some milk for glazing on top of the crust to get it that nice brown finish itself. So sit back and enjoy, and I only wish you were able to taste these when we're done. So take about an hour to cook these pies, but they're well worth all the work that goes into making it. So enjoy the show, and we'll just call this our apple pie segment. We've washed our apples. Next step, of course, is peeling the apples. A good apple peeler is pretty critical, especially if you're doing a lot of apples or a lot of anything. So over the years, I've tried different peelers, and I would associate an apple peeler with a carpenter and his favorite hammer. You get a carpenter, he has one hammer, and he'll probably make that hammer last forever. It's the same thing with someone who likes to cook. Your peeler is going to be critical to it. After you've peeled the apple, then it's just cutting it into quarters. Simply coring it, and then I'll just slice it. I like thin slices on it. If the slices are too thick, our pies are baked for 55 minutes. And if the slices are too thick or it's the wrong type of apple, then it just doesn't cook through, and the apple would be undone. So that's why we like to, once again, use the McIntosh, but there's no exact science or measurement I use with the slices, but the slices are just, uniformly thin throughout, and they're always really good to eat. So that's a bonus for the baker. I love eating the apples, so I always cut up an extra couple that I know I won't need in the baking, so I get to eat. It's good, it's healthy, especially this time of year. The fruit is plentiful, but I will usually use, depending on the type of pie plate, the pie dish, I will use around, I'm going to say 8 to 10 apples per pie. So there's some shallow pie plates that you don't need as many apples for, but on a full size, a full dish, you're going to need a good 10 apples. And I'll show you as we're cooking them how to put the apples in, what to use in the filling for it. But that's another reason to cut up extra, because it would be terrible to have that dough sitting, and you never want to make dough ahead of time. You want to make it just when you're going to use it. And if you run out of apples and you have to sit there and core and slice while the dough is sitting, it doesn't always work right. So the dough has to be at a critical temperature as you're cooking it, and that's why the prep work is going to be everything. The apple recipes that I've used over the years, I started with my mom's recipe, which was my great-great-grandmother's recipe. And over the years, a lot of these recipes, as usual, were never written down. So my mom is the one who taught me how to do a lot of cooking. But then I would take that recipe, and over the years of learning what different ingredients do to recipes, I would add or subtract different ingredients. And the thing with making pies, you have to make the pie with the new recipe. And there's been lots of pies over the years that were okay, but not great. So you just remember what it is you did and keep trying and adjusting until you come to a recipe that you really like. So in me saying that there was a lot of years of trial and error, there were a lot of years, but I now have finally written a recipe down because my children, my siblings have all asked for it. So I've learned what works and what you use: 1/4 teaspoon of, 1/2 teaspoons of, 2 teaspoons of, the different amounts of sugar, the different amounts of cinnamon, nutmeg, water, coming into a perfect blend for the filling. I would not say this is a sugar-free recipe, so if you can't handle the amount of sugar, that's where some of the different levels of ingredients would have to come into play. But this recipe started in Poland and Germany and came over, and so I love the different recipes. I've cooked these pies on open fires. I've cooked these pies on Weber grills. I've cooked these in the ovens, commercial ovens. So like anything else, as you're cooking them, just trust your timing, trust your temperatures, and let them cook through. Ta-da! There's 20 apples. So we have apples here to make 2 full pies, and it was 20 apples worth. So as you can see, some of them, the longer they sit, they start browning. It's really no big deal when you're cooking them into the apples itself. I generally don't cut apples more than a half hour before I start to use them, because I don't want them to get too brown. But we are cooking them, so it won't matter. Some people put a little bit of lemon juice on them. I have some lemon juice in our filling, so I don't sprinkle any on the apples itself. So let's set these aside and let's make the filling and then the crust. The next part is actually, I'll call it the filling. The filling is what I am going to be putting on the apples. So after we make the crust, we put a layer of apples. I put a coating on it. And the coating is just nothing more than sugar, cinnamon, nutmeg, some lemon juice, a little bit of flour. But this is the filling part of it. But we're doing this in these different segments. I always cut the apples, then I make the filling, then I make the dough last. Because after you make the dough, you want to use it immediately. You don't want it sitting around while you're doing and making the filling or peeling apples. So now we're going to put together the filling part of it, what I sprinkle on the apples. That way, when I have the dough ready, everything is there. Boom, boom, boom. I could put the total pie together and put it in the oven. So this is your middle segment of the pie, This is the sugar, the spices, and everything that are going to be sprinkled on top of the apples. Okay, now, in doing this, it's a 3/4 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of flour, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of some nutmeg, and then just a couple teaspoons of lemon juice. But what you're going to see me doing, I'm making 2 pies today, so I'm going to be doubling that amount. So you'll see me scooping a little bit more than that. But originally, you'd be normally doing just 1 3/4 cup of sugar on a normal one, and we're going to be just 2 tablespoons of flour. I blend together the flour and the sugar. I like to blend it in different segments instead of throwing too much in the bowl all at once. This way I'm going to make sure that I got a good blending and I don't have any clumps through here. And we're going to add 1/2 teaspoon of the cinnamon. And we're going to add a 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg. I'll blend this together, and I just use a regular kitchen fork as I'm blending this. It's really nothing special. It's just wide enough spacings on it to get everything blended through. And you can see that the cinnamon easily darkens the sugar. And the flour that's in there is just adding a little bit of substance, a little bit of body, especially when we mix the lemon juice in it. It gels it, it holds it all together is what the flour is actually doing. Okay. And normally it's only about 2 teaspoons. See, this will take a little bit longer to blend because the lemon juice, being what it is, it's going to pull together the sugar and the flour. Just try and get the clumps out of it. And there you go. There's your filling: sugar, flour, nutmeg, cinnamon, lemon juice. And that's what we'll sprinkle in between the different layers of the apples in the crust. So let's make the dough now. This gives you the filling that we use in between the layers of apples that we put into the crust. It adds a lot of the flavor to it. Let's put this aside with the apples and let's make the crust. The hardest part to learn of a pie, the most critical part of the pie, is going to be the crust. The crust makes or breaks the entire pie. You can get the best apples, the different fillings, but the crust itself, it has to be well baked through. It has to be flaky. It can't be watery, can't be too dry. That's the hardest part to learn on it. And what I have found in doing this pie crust itself, and this is a 2-layer pie crust, so we will make enough dough here to do the bottom layer in the pie dish and the top itself, and it's a full top crust to it. But ingredient wise, I'm going to have 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. We're going to have 2 teaspoons of salt, and it's a critical part of it. People will be using a little more, a little less. I found that for this 2-piece crust, 2 teaspoons of salt. Then we're going to be using regular Crisco shortening. We're going to be using 3/4 cup of shortening, and then it's going to be 6, 7, 8. You'll know the consistency when you're mixing with it. I generally am about 8 teaspoons of ice cold water. and you're going to be kneading it all together with your hands. So have your hands clean. We'll start with a little blending fork, to get the most of it done, but then you got to finish it with your hands itself, and that's going to put together the crust. We'll break it in two and do the top and do the bottom for it. So 2.5 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, 3/4 cup of shortening, and ice cold water is going to make a to die for crust. So let's get our hands dirty. Start with our flour, 1, 2. And a half. From there, I'm going to go 2 teaspoons of salt. It's hard to believe the difference between 1 and 2 teaspoons can change the flavor of that crust, but it really can. And those are the only 2 dry ingredients. I'll just blend those together. And then the Crisco itself, I found that what works best for me is I just buy these cubes. Crisco can go bad, so if you buy the tubs, I never buy too much, because if this, after a month or so, it loses its ability. And then from there, I'll just use my dough whip. I'll blend the Crisco in. Every so often I'll have to clean it, so I really want to make sure we got all the shortening blended through. It's funny, over the years, the people I tell about making pies, how many people are fearful of making a pie dough. It's really not hard. Find someone to practice on, even if it's just for food for yourself. But a lot of the feel of the crust goes into the years of experience in making it, but it really isn't as hard as it appears. So this is everything blended up to the point that we're going to add some water to it. We need a bigger spoon. And I'm going to dump out the ice cubes. Add the ice cubes in there just to keep it ice cold. And from there, just get some flour on your hands and get in there and start blending it together. You could feel the cold water on your hands, which is good. But you need the water to hold the dough together. And you can see that it's very well blended. You can see how flaky it is. Trying to clean the extra dough off my hands to keep it with the dough we're cooking. And there's a perfect absolutely perfect dough. And we're going to not quite break it in half. We're going to say 2/3, 1/3. The 1/3 is going to be for the top. I don't need quite as much. The base, because of the deep pie pan, you want to make sure you have enough for the base. So let me set these aside. I'm going to get the rolling pin, and we're going to flour off the base here and roll it out. Okay, I'm just going to put flour down on our surface area. I take our pie dough, flatten, and flip it a couple times. Make sure I have plenty of flour down because I don't want it to stick. Make sure your rolling pin. This is my mother's, or I should say my grandmother's rolling pin. I've tried all the marble, all the plastic you filled with water, and I am a traditionalist when it comes to my rolling pin. I like my old-fashioned wooden rolling pin. I'm going to get a nice thin crust, but you don't want it thin to a point that it'll break on you. Once again, it's all in the feel, and you can guide your crust by the size of the pan. So there's my pie plate. You can see everything is going to be a little over the side of it. So I will take our dough and very gently I use the rolling pin to pull the dough back up. I will just ease it over the top. And we will drape it down into the pie dish. From here, fix any little cracks or points in there, making sure the dough is all the way down to the bottom so it doesn't stretch when you put in your filling. And there's a very good dish there. Then we're going to take our apples, put a layer of apples in, and we take our sugar, cinnamon, put a layer, go back to the apples, layer. Yes, I know, I ate another one. Some more sugar. Cinnamon on it. Now another little trick. I will take butter and I will put 4 little squares around the top of the apples. Okay, and we can cut a little bit of the excess off because you never roll it perfect, but you don't want to cut it right up to the dish yet because you'll see that we'll need to crimp and create an edge going around. Now let's get the rest of our dough. Knead together any of the little excess we had. down your flour. As you can see, I ran out a little bit of flour on the last one. It stuck a little bit to the surface, which was no big deal if you're taking your time. This piece can be smaller in size because we're just layering this on the top. And once again, carefully roll it. Bring your pie dish over, draping it over the top. And from here, we're going to pinch all the corners from the bottom layer to the top layer. And this is going to close off the pie, because if you get a bunch of filling boiling over, you'll make a mess of your stove, your oven. And as you can see, there's no dough left. This. I'm going to make a breather cut. I make 3, 1 large, 2 small. Now, one other little thing that I do, you saw milk as one of my ingredients. I will take just a paper towel, I'll dab the milk, and I'll coat the surface of the pie. When you see a pie that has a golden brown color to it, the golden brown actually was caused by the browning of the milk. So you don't want any puddles, but you just are brushing it onto there and try and keep it away from the ends, and that'll give the whole pie a golden brown look to it. One last other thing that I found is I will use a ring, a metal ring. The ends of the pie always burn. A lot of people take foil and just wrap foil around, getting one of these little pie rings, and it just fits perfectly over top, and it'll keep the ends of the pie from burning. So from here, we're ready to put it into the oven, and we're going to be baking this. Doesn't that look good? It's not quite ready to eat, but 425 degrees for 55 minutes. Just set the timer, don't peek, trust it. That's what it'll take to cook. So let's slide it in the oven. Okay, middle rack. Slide it on in, and we'll set a cooking timer. And another 55 minutes, our pie will be done. Pie is done. It's been 55 minutes, so I'm going to put on my good old oven gloves, and let's take this pie out and see what it looks like and get a nice whiff. Look at that. Isn't that a nice looking apple pie? Take the ring off. You can see that you got some golden brown from the milk, but the ends of it and everything are nice, thoroughly cooked, crisp, but not burnt. What's more all-American than apple pie? So thank you for watching another segment of Handy Andy. I know this was a little different, but I cannot wait to taste this. So apple pie, happy July 4th, happy birthday America. Let's dig in. Life is good.
I'll tell you what. Work doesn't get better than this.